He felt like he was in his body, but he wasn't. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it was like I knew what I was doing, but I couldn't control what I was doing. Behind that smile, it was sadness. It was empty. It was fake.
And I've spoken publicly about it, so it's no secret. I made a mistake one time myself in dealing with a person, right? And unfortunately, the person put down the phone for me, and they committed suicide right away. And the reason I gave them no hope, right? It was an awful blunder to make. Like, the man was asking me a straight question, and unfortunately, I gave him a straight answer. And it was to do with taxation, and it was to do with a problem I was working with for him. And he had to give a substantial sum of money to the taxman. And he rang me with the question, is there anything else that can be done? And I'll always regret it, but I said, no, they can't. I said, look, we're at the end of the line. I had brought the sum down from a very large sum to what was still a large sum, but it was a massive reduction, and I knew I had everything politically done that I could do. But like, I should have said, oh, look, I'll go and I'll talk to you about it, and I should have, but like, I've no denying, I was just factual, and it was a case of, no, sure, there's no more can be done. And he said, no, well, I won't pay it, he said. And of course, this is where the inexperience came in at the time. Like, I didn't hear what he was saying to me. He said very clear to me, he said, no, I won't pay it. He said, I will not pay it. He said, I won't give it to him. He said, I won't give it to him. And like, I should have copped it, and I didn't. And he stood up at his kitchen table, and he hung himself.
A lot of people who have depression, they kind of it's kind of it'll be at a sort of low level, where they're sort of high functioning for a lot of the time, and with occasional dips. But when you have an episode, it's much more severe than that. It's not just feeling down the dumps for a couple of days. It's a much more all-encompassing sort of feeling. It's feeling tired, exhausted all the time. It's having constant rumination, worrying about things that are bothering you, not being able to enjoy any things that you would usually enjoy. I do feel that the way that my mental illness is a weakness in my own character. I sincerely feel that if I was a stronger person, I would just get on with it and wouldn't need to look to others for help. I often hear people saying things like asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that's fundamentally, I just think that's a contradiction in terms. And I have met plenty of people who have struggled with issues much more severe, objectively severe and distressing than I have experienced, and they've come out on top and they've succeeded more than I have, and I can only feel shame by contrast to those people.
They went to the left, to the side of the Spanish Arch, and I don't know what told me, but I went to Jory's, and he had two hands beside him and his head down, and he was just crying. But when I looked at him, I knew his jeans were wet. He'd already been in the water. But I think he got afraid. And I think this was him trying to go in a second time. I was there with him and I was saying, come on, get down. And he was saying, no, this is it. And I said, well, if you go, I'm going. I said, your kids are going to be left, my kids are going to be left, so we'll have to go together. And all I remember was a guard tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to step back. And they grabbed him, his head went down. And he was arrested for his own safety until the next morning, which was a Sunday morning, and then we brought him home here. He was on the couch and he just hood up, and it was just very, very dark, very, very low.
Focus, but of course it's in every community. I can name or reference a number of people here in this community. You said you can do it for your community. Anyone, I'm sure, can name people, predominantly men, but not in all cases.
The parish in Galway, where over the space of about 6 months or 8 months, there was 8 suicides, young people, young boys.
Look, I think sadly in Galway, I think everyone's been affected by suicide and by depression, but specifically in relation to suicide, you know, people that I would have known growing up or people I went to school with and that.
Media has a very important role to play in it. And first of all, is the media. There are set guidelines that when a suicide happens, is how they can report it and how it can be, explained through the national media and local media.
And so, if somebody has seen somebody dealing with major life events and coping with them by ending their life, then that's something that they may copy because they see that person and they see how they were under similar stresses to yourself, and the reaction is often, well, that was how he dealt with it, and maybe that would be that is how I should deal with it. And a lot of the press reporting guidelines are an attempt to stop that.
If there is a suicide in a locality, that can be a point cluster or copycat in that regards, because it nearly normalises, it socially sanctions that behaviour. So media have to be very careful.
The last thing you want is copycats, which has happened sometimes as well. So, when you lose a friend, the grief is just immeasurable. And then what happens is that you have to make sure is that everybody else is looking after everybody else at the same time. So that's sometimes where you don't see it reported as much in the media. Okay, that's the first reason. Secondly is that the shame that people would have still with suicide. And it is a big, big thing.
What does help is talking about the impact it has on other people.
On the 29th of December, a friend of his rang here and said she didn't like the tone of his voice on the phone. Myself and my mother got up and we went out to where he was living. So when we got there, he was attempting to take his own life again. The house was in darkness, there was no electricity. He had the attic opening, or the little opening in the roof and the ceiling, and he had like a level and the belt. So again I rang Weststock, it was the only place I could ring at the time, and I explained to them what was happening and whatever, so they told me to bring him down. So I brought him down for his appointment in Weststock, and I went in with him, myself and my aunt. Anthony went in first and he said what he had to say, and then he asked could we be brought in. The doctor said to me that's €60, so I presumed she'd given him something or recommended something, so I paid the €60 and she pulled me us aside and she said, he's not in any immediate danger, he's okay, I don't feel he's in threat of his life. And I said, how can you say that when this is actually the second attempt and this is quite serious? It's Christmas week.
How soon after his attempt was it she said this?
An hour.
An hour?
An hour, yeah. So she felt as a professional that his life basically wasn't in danger. And I said, well, I feel it is. I'm his sister, I think I know. She told me no, and she was the professional. So I remember he bawled crying. And we went outside. I'll never forget, it was a Thursday. So basically the doctor inside had told me, it's Christmas week, there's not really anyone working. Well, I said, it's Christmas week, do people not kill themselves for Christmas or what? And she said to me, there's a doctor open next Tuesday, why don't you bring him there? So I said Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. What do I do for 6 days with him? I can't sleep. I'm watching him. If I fall asleep and he dies, what do I do? So she said, no, he's not in any danger. He's fine. We went back to his flat. So when we got back there, I kind of realised what she had done. And I said, hold on a second, this isn't good enough. And I went back to Weststock. And I said to her when she came out, I said, can I actually speak to you for a minute, please? So she said, I'm dealing with another patient. So I said, that's fine, I'll wait. She came back to me about 25 minutes later and she said, yeah. And I said, I don't feel you've treated my brother the way he should have been treated. He's actually 99% his life is in danger at the moment. And I said, I just can you give me something just to put him to sleep for tonight, or help me to sedate him a small little bit, anything. He's never used medication, like he wouldn't have used medication, or he's never been on strong medication as such or anything. So she gave me a prescription for 2 tablets, and then she actually scribbled out 2 and she put in 1, and she told me to go to Briarhill Pharmacy. It was 9:45 at this stage. She told me to go to Briarhill Pharmacy, that they'd be open. So I flew out, went to Briarhill. Briarhill was closed. Rushed from Briarhill Pharmacy out to Salthill, got there 2 minutes to 10. Went in, and because she had scribbled the script, they must have thought it was me.
Yeah.
So they had to get back in contact with Weststock. Long story short, I ended up getting the tablet. I gave it to him when I got there. He didn't want to take it. That was the 29th of December. We lost him on the 12th of February.
When a person is experiencing not just a bad mood, but a mental disorder such as depression and anxiety, they need to speak to a qualified professional, and sometimes the advice offered by a well-meaning but unqualified family member or friend can be at best useless and in some cases counterproductive.
On 1 or 2 occasions when I did try to talk to someone, even to try and help me understand myself, I remember being quite taken back by the sense in which they were quite dismissive of even the attempt at having the conversation.
With regards, so yes, you can go and you can speak to your friends, and it's great, and you should absolutely do that. I'm not saying don't do that, because do that, like, it is great. But I think it kind of can get to the point where you feel like you're just nagging them.
Even for the 1 or 2 people that I tried to speak to, perhaps they were dismissive because I was entering territory that was new to them.
Another friend of mine who was like, I knew him in different stages of my life, but I was never very, very close to him, or a lovely person who did commit suicide. And I remember being so angry from coming from his funeral, because it was so tragic. It was just horrible, like. And coming from it, and I remember that some people came just to get the gossip.
A lot of people who ring us say they would never share what's going on in their life.
It was a Saturday evening. We had rang him. So he had said he was going for a couple of pints, and he had his little one's communion mass, you know, they had to practice for that. So that they were going to do that, have a drink or 2 and go back and have pizza. So I said, just, you know, go home early and don't drink any shorts or whatever the next morning. And he said to Amanda, I'm going for a walk. And he kept, this wouldn't have been really unusual now. This was the regime, you see. So she said, hold on and I'll go with you. So I said, no, your runners are left in the car in Tonry's. So I left 20 euro on the locker. Gave her a kiss, said, go in and get your car and I'll meet you back here. So the next she heard was about 20 minutes later. He rang her and he told her this was it, that there was no talking to him, that he just wanted peace, and he was going to smoke his fag. When he was finished his fag, that was it. So she was texting my mother, and my mother had still been at work till 7 in the morning. And then he said, who are you texting? She said, I'm not texting anyone. She said, just talk to me or whatever. And she was saying, like, you know, you've Leah's communion, you've Keith's confirmation in a couple of weeks, and you know your mum and your dad. And she said it was pure calm, there wasn't a sound. And she said to him, what about Amanda? She'll never get over this. And he said, you'll mind her, she'll be alright. It was the only thing he reacted to. He had tried to ring my mother, and he had tried to ring another fella he knew that was suffering with the same kind of problem. And that poor lad, he had been in an accident, he broke his ribs and he couldn't get up to answer the phone. So to finish the conversation, he said, I finished my fag. And she said, where are you? And he was gone. But my mother had copped between them anyway, that it was Ross Hill, my granddad's. just got through to my aunt. She lives on the main road. So she started running over and screaming his name. We do reckon he heard her. And she got there and he was hanging in the turf shed.
Very common recently to say, oh, it's okay not to be okay. And it is okay not to be okay. But it doesn't feel okay not to be okay. It's okay to admit that you're not doing very well. But it's still not okay.
The difference with mental health and suicide prevention and mental health awareness, they're all kind of, yes, they're intertwined, but they need to be treated as separate identities.
People like swear by their medication. Other people have a really strong motivation to not be on medication for whatever, again, the stigma around that, or not feeling that they want to be reliant on that.
I take such a strong dose of medication that when I'm actually upset, I can't physically cry because I'm just, it kind of numbs me out. Like my voice will crackle and things like that, but like I'll be like trying to draw tears and it's like my emotion just doesn't come out.
Here, I have seen people who might be on the same medication, but it alters, it sometimes it agrees for them, and sometimes it doesn't.
I was first diagnosed with depression when I was 15. I was having kind of the trouble in school, and so I was prescribed Prozac. I used Prozac for several months, then I came off it, and then at 17, I had kind of another episode, I suppose you'd say, and I was prescribed Seroquel. Yeah, at 23, I had like another episode, and I wasn't able to work for a few months, and so at that time I was prescribed venlafaxine. I am kind of wary about this general trend and tendency in modern society to respond to problems, ailments by medicalising them, and sometimes there's no good reason to medicalise things. Sometimes, as depressing as it sounds, bereavement and feeling miserable when someone close to you dies is actually just a part of the human condition.
I was here at home and the knock came to the door and he said, Anthony is missing. And I said, he's gone, isn't he? He said, no. And I said, where is he? And he said, I don't know, but we're going to Ormore. When we got there, I got out and they kind of stood in a line trying to block me. So I ran through them and I seen him. And when I seen him on the ground, I knew he was gone. It was just whatever was left beaten. I knew he was gone. The guards and ambulance that were there, they were pumping him and saying they were trying to do, his heart, or they had machines on him. So I sat there until he was brought in the ambulance, but I knew in my heart, but I couldn't accept it that this was it. So we left and we went over to the hospital. But I remember going over and I said the sirens aren't ringing. It's silent. So we were actually at the hospital before the ambulance pulled in. So when the ambulance pulled in, I stood at the back door. And again, his belly was going up and down. They had machines on him. And they brought him out. And they said, give us a few minutes, we're trying to resuscitate him. So we were all outside. And a nurse came out. And she said, the family saw myself and my mother and my father went in, and she said, in a few minutes, she said, you're going to be called in and the machines are going to be turned off. So we went into the room and they counted down the time, and when the time was up, he was gone. I noticed this label on his hand with his name, date of birth, and on the label I seen cardiac arrest. It's cardiac arrest and not suicide. So they tried to say that his heart failed last, so basically that's how he died, not from strangulation or asphyxiation.
And that might be a way of kind of keeping the figures down, if you like.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do believe that. I believe any option they have that they can take away a figure from suicide, they will do so. They don't like the numbers to be as high as they actually are.
You need to take that first step and talk to somebody. And the first step is the hardest. There are long waiting lists for mental health supports.
Okay, we'll just say they were advertising Pieta House when my brother was found at Jory's. When I rang Pieta House, I was told, okay, no, there's nowhere for you to be seen for at least 6 to 8 weeks. So where was I to go? Then in December, I went and seek medical advice. I went there and they sent me home. Where do you go? What do you do? Like, none of these. I'm not trained to know what to do with them. I done what I thought was the best, and clearly that none of these options work. So where do they get the help from? Where do they get the hope from? Like, in the end, we had to pay €100 session for a counsellor. Like, what if we didn't have that €100 every session? You know, was he not to get counselling because he couldn't afford it? Even though he'd worked all his life, but still €100 was a lot of money. There's nothing that looks any better now than 5 years ago, to be honest. It's as, I suppose, rampant now as what it was then. There seems to be no proper avenue or instructions as to what you're supposed to do. I followed everything. Supposedly we were supposed to do Samaritans, Pieta House, you know, doctors, professionals, and we were just thrown down avenue to avenue to avenue. You know, we were never, he would have made it. But if things were different and he did get help and he did have hope, hope is very important, because when they don't have that, you don't have anything. And when you have hope and belief, you will try to carry on.
When a member of our family takes their own life, the question, of course, that everybody in the family asks is, why didn't I do something more? Did I do as much as I could? And did I fall short somewhere? And I think it's the most human thing in the world to ask those questions. We have to admire parents who do their utmost, and friends and family members, and yet they have to cope with the reality of somebody taking their own lives as well.
No one of us can ever say, oh, you know, sure, I'm fine out, like, sure, nothing ever happens to me and I never take any notice of anything. That's not true. I don't care who you are, I don't care what you have, right? Like, everybody has bad times. But that's why I always say to the person, like, try to hold on, you know, try to have that little bit of hope. Wait to see, will tomorrow be a nicer day in every shape of the world?
It's important for all of us, irrespective of our gender, our culture, our whatever, that we take care of ourselves and that we act responsible for ourselves.
And at the end of it all, like, suicide is not going to answer it. It ends it for the person struggling, but it starts it for the family, and that never goes away. I'd never, ever, ever believed that I would actually stand and watch him be buried in front of my eyes. Never thought that. Like, he left me alone here.